Or a big metal slammer that says Fury's Edge on it.
Oh, yes,
Ooh.
dude. Mm-hmm. Well, great. Now Pog is absolutely bound to this weapon.
Hello, and welcome to Khyber Shards, a 5th edition actual play show set in the Eberron campaign world. I'm Philip.
I'm Colin.
And I'm Casey.
And since it's Friday and we're not all here, you probably realize that this is one of our Khyber Shards Answers episode where we take questions from our audience. This time we have a few questions from our Discord and where we chat a little bit about the mayhem that went on in the last episode. So I want to start by just declaring so that everyone understands where the genius of this show lies. I didn't plan any of that. Like, nothing that happened in the last
Neither
episode
did we.
was a result of what was anywhere in my notebook. Nowhere in my notebook do you find, and then Pog challenges Kolos. Like, none of that anywhere in my notebook. The leopard thing came up because Shade went over to look at the carnival, and I thought this is an excellent opportunity to introduce that element of Shade's character, and the plan was all theirs and the execution was all theirs. I made up my responses to that as we went. So
good.
If you think Khyber
Well
Shards
done.
is great, it's not my doing. It's absolutely the group of players that I have. Because that was just spectacular madness.
That was a wild ride.
It was great. It was so,
I kind of thought
so very great.
that was what you had intended.
Yeah, it played so smoothly that you could have fooled
Well,
me.
I wasn't sure what would happen if I introduced the leopard, because you and I had talked about this. You're going with an animal companion, and we were going to introduce your animal companion. I feel like that's been pretty well telegraphed at this point, so that's
Right.
not spoiling. And so we had talked about that, and I had talked about Tooth and Nail, the Fatalist thing, and so we'd introduced that idea, but I brought that up just as a description in the going to visit Solarca scene, to just seed in. Also, this exists. This shop exists over here, so that later it would be there, and we could do that then. Because I figured you would actually go back to the ship's cat, and I was gonna, and
Like
frankly,
a logical
I thought
person.
that was what I was just trying to seed it in there, for the future. And then you went over there, and so I thought, okay, well, she's there, so let's introduce this creature. And I mean, once it became clear that Shade's interest was a breakout, I leaned into that, right? I mean, I made it evident that, people are buying the animals. This is how this works. I wasn't really sure whether you would go for it now or whether you would try to make a plan with the whole group first. But yeah, I mean, once it was clear where the train was headed, I jumped aboard. So it wasn't I was trying desperately to stop what was happening.
Right.
I was enthusiastically aboard. But yeah, that wasn't there. That wasn't my in my notes to do that. Well, I hadn't planned for the jailbreak. You guys made the plan on your own, so I had no opportunity to plan how to respond to the distraction plan with Pog. And I just looked down my list for what's an NPC that would be interesting for Pog to see and thought, oh, well, okay, gladiators would be here. and Kolos was honestly the gladiator name I could remember from among the list of gladiator NPCs. You can see me searching for it in my notes on the episode. I just go on describing, and the biggest, and you see, someone who would not, you're not surprised to see here looking at what exotic beasts would be someone from the Red Ring, and explain what Kolos. That's the name, Kolos.
Well played.
Yeah. So that was just delightful, and man, you can see my surprise when Pog steps up on Kolos, because that came out of nowhere that I saw.
It was so good.
Pog's wrestling star persona coming out was not anticipated by me, and it was just so great.
I blame Eric because we have been having Discord calls watching old WWE matches, and I don't know, it felt right. It was the thing, you know.
It was perfect.
Yes.
It was
Yes,
absolutely
it was.
perfect.
For the moment, though, I just the real sense in that reaction, though, was after you announced Kolos and you gave his description, the turn of, okay, who's the second biggest guy here? And then, you know, Shade said she needed something, so Pog's gonna help Shade. So that's what that was.
No, it was the but what are you gonna like? It was that just killed me. It was
I don't even know why. It was
I
a
loved
real
every minute
risk.
of it.
Now that I've listened back, I realize how much riskier that was
Woo.
than it felt in the moment. Man,
That feels
I
like a good GM keeping you alive.
I felt a deep sense of relief when you picked unarmed.
yeah. Oh no, yeah, for sure. That. Pog's dumb, not stupid.
So I felt a deep sense of relief because that meant this could be, it would be possible for Kolos to win without necessarily laying Pog out on the ground. Whereas if we had done it with weapons, Pog still might have won. It would be, dice, but especially after Pog starts, especially after Pog starts raging and he's resistant to damage. That's a big,
Yeah, but I'm still
that's
dealing
a big benefit.
4.
Yeah,
I'm only dealing 4 damage.
but even if it was still just the 3 hits wins, it would just be so much more dangerous to get hit by him with that axe.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. For sure.
As you've seen, because it's in your inventory now.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
So yes, I was relieved by that. Well, speaking of that, there was a question specifically related to that from Leopard, who simply asks, "Were you afraid Pog was going to die?"
Not at the outset, but that's why the panic into we should have some kind of declaration of victory other than standard knockout, because Kolos's knockout, I would just imagine, could have just smooth taken his head off. So yeah, I didn't think so when I picked Kolos to start a fight with, but it was the description on that very first hit when you were like, it's hard. What you hit is hard, that I was like, oh, so I'm that far in over my head. Okay, this is bad. This is real bad. And on a story level, I was really glad that the dice let him stay focused, because even the exploding fireworks were not going to draw away from the fact that Pog was scared in that moment. There wasn't any cockiness. Pog got scared fast, but yeah, it was an intense fight.
Yeah. I was not. I felt fairly confident Pog wouldn't die, partly because Esri was there, and so if Pog got laid out, there's someone there who can run forward and hit him with some healing. And I mean, for that matter, Shade, I know, has cure wounds, but although she was on the other side of the
She wasn't exactly there.
space. Yeah, she wasn't exactly conveniently located for that. So I felt confident Pog would die. I was not sure whether Pog would get knocked out or not, but I was fairly confident Pog would not be killed. So
The part that is scary is that in that situation, Pog would not run. Like that's not who he, even with the knockout, while enraged, you pop back up with 1 HP. Pog would not disengage and run away.
yeah. Extending that question to Casey, what was your level of confidence in the plan once it was in motion?
Such as it was.
Right. Casey, the player, was not confident. I mean, if I was in that situation, I would have waited for companions, cover of night.
Was Shade confident, or was Shade just, we've got to do it now?
A little bit of both. She feels confident about her ability to sneak. She feels fairly confident about her ability to incite chaos, or at least Pog's ability to incite chaos. And Solarka said she could pick a lock. So, I mean, what else did Shade need? She...
Had all the pieces.
Right.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah. Fully formed, foolproof.
Yeah, it's in retrospect, we probably could have just followed the cages being rolled back somewhere and independently picked that and gotten you your peacock leopard, but yeah.
I mean, I don't think Shade would have been content with just the peacock leopard being freed.
Valid.
But yes, that would
fair
have been
point.
the safer way to have stumbled upon her companion.
All right. Well, let's get into some more questions. We have one from Laura. How many animals live at the treehouse now? Which Casey clarified. How many currently live there, or how many do we want to eventually live there?
Valid.
What is what are Shade and Pog's ideal number of in-home animals?
Yes.
Right.
Yep. In and around, just yes.
Yeah. Shade would be happy for anybody to come live in. I'm sorry, any creature to come live at the treehouse. There's
Yeah,
room.
like an animal hostel. Just come in,
Yeah.
hang out for a couple nights. You can breeze on out when you're done. Yeah,
Right.
all of them. The only animals we currently have are Pog and our new pretty kitty.
Shade is a fox person.
That's true. That's true. You're closer to actual animal than I am, I suppose. I need those ears.
Esri is a druid. He hasn't, but he could be an animal, I think.
Oh, that's right. Esri lives at the treehouse.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Oh.
He lives on the tree. He's a moss man.
Oh, man.
He heals us.
Laura also...
Oh,
true.
for sure he does. Oh, no, for sure. He actually didn't even argue with Pog all that much. We just kind of didn't have time to. We just ran.
Yeah. Laura also asks, is Pog going to set up Ari and Kolos?
Good question. So, no, not intentionally anyway. Like he said, when it's not a good look for Ari, it's kind of cool that, everybody else we've seen them have their their interactions outside of the group. And, Carl has that very precious relationship with Pog, but it's, the owner and the employee that he's just taken under his wing. But in Pog's mind, Kolos treated him as an equal at the end, and that's my thing. Like, Kolos is my friend, and I don't think the idea of chemistry or attraction had played into Pog's mind at all. When Ari asked, it wasn't about the kind of attention that Ari wanted from Kolos. It was about like, no, he's my friend. I just got my friend. Hang on, like boundaries here. But eventually, if Ari were to make that more clear that was his intention, yeah, probably. Yeah.
All right. Richard asks, how many weeks/months will Pog find ways to talk about this fight and his new prize axe to anyone who does or does not want to hear about it?
Yes. No, honest, talk about the fight and the prize axe. I'm glad those are two separate, because about the fight, yeah, this is the first thing that Pog has done that could be considered a legacy action. I mean, granted, it was a first to hit the other 3 times fist fight, but he defeated the legend in combat. Like that's a thing of glory, and that's what is going to stick with Pog. About his axe, without trying to think too much about future events before they've happened, I don't know what Pog's relationship with that weapon is just yet. There's something special about having been given a weapon, and I don't know where Pog's sense of ownership is over it yet. It's gonna be taken to Solarka and her family, and we will see what the weapon is. But I don't. I think I'm kind of interested in the idea of that weapon as a responsibility rather than a prize. So we'll see. He gonna be talking about the fight though.
All right. Richard also asks, what happens when Pog and Shade realize they may be more effective without Ari and Esri? Is that the lesson Pog and Shade, do you think, have taken from this? that things go better when Ari and Esri aren't there to hold them back? Or rein them in, perhaps is the better term.
You first, yeah.
I don't think Shade has had enough time yet to have learned anything from this. I think given some time to process this series of events, she will be terrified at how much attention she drew. I think that she feels effective in having freed them from their cages and having come up with and executed a plan that she communicated to Pog. But I think she also will recognize that need for having the other input that's like, maybe there are other ways.
Okay.
I think for the Pog side, it's just evidence that Shade can also think good, because she came up with a plan and it worked. And much like telling the truth to Miss Lady, you're not going to be able to convince him otherwise, because the fireworks went off, but that distraction kept people from looking. That worked. And it seems like there have been events back to back that kind of will reinforce Pog's position of we should all be taken seriously. Because Shade can tell me what to do and we can have it work too. So I think it's just another instance of independence for him.
Yeah. Continuing from Richard, does Shade feel emboldened to commit more acts of eco-terrorism? I hope so. Is Shade now an eco-vigilante out after House Vatalis?
That would be so much fun. It'd be so much fun. I think that she had a successful go at it. I think eventually she will recognize the amount of attention that the plan may have garnered. We definitely, at the end of that episode, as she's running away, she's spotted by multiple people. And so I think that will scare her.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think it'll scare her away from trying again. She just will have to be sneakier and more clever in her eco-terrorism ways.
Pin her scarf up.
Right. She really needs to figure out how to better cover it up. The old way is not working.
Or like a form-fitting cowl of some kind, depicting, a symbolic animal by which she could be known.
Solid.
It's the origin of Shade's superhero moniker. All right. Since connected to that question, since Shade was spotted by members of House Vatalis, is she, I guess you kind of answered this, is she concerned about potential repercussions for her actions?
Yes. Yes, she is.
Yeah.
She was spotted by multiple people. She was spotted running away with a panther that hit somebody upside the head. It's a good panther.
Blends in real well, though.
Casey, the player, is definitely has concerns about my personal choice, not concerns in the sense of regrets. It's absolutely beautiful and fantastic. But yeah, there are some concerns about how I get to have a beast companion that is so noticeable.
When you said you liked the idea of it being Fae, that came with some to lift the curtain a little bit. Once Casey had kind of given me a direction, I sent some suggestions of things that would fit that category, as well as just pictures, because some things I don't tend to assume everybody knows what every creature in the monster manual looks like, because why would you know that if you're not running a game or I don't know, a crazy nerd like myself. So I sent her, and so she picked the peacock flavored leopard. So that was
I did.
That was player
Flavored?
choice.
Oh, this is gonna be a weird story all of a sudden. This escalated quickly.
I find that the art incredibly helpful. I'm such a visual person that being able to see a picture helps me to visualize what it looks like in game, what it looks like walking around with Shade. And that artwork was just gorgeous.
Yeah, it was also cool to get that artwork and then watch Philip roleplay in that persona. That was very satisfying.
Yeah. All right. I mean, that's a slightly tricky thing I have found as a GM. When you have a thing that is technically part of a player's character sheet that you occasionally have to portray. I find that with doing, if you have a more, Ari is a warlock, but his patron is his mark, so it's kind of impersonal. when you have a more personal patron, having to portray that, which I've had to do for a couple of different players. And with the nature of the animal companion, and with the fact that Shade has access to spells that let her talk to it, which is not something that happens all the time with animal companions, it's a little intimidating as a GM, because this is some part of that player's character concept, and I don't want to make it mine. Like, I don't want to make it my own. I want it to still be Casey's, because Casey's gonna decide what her animal companion does in any given moment. So I don't know. It's a little bit of a tricky thing, but it's a fun character. I get to role play it a little more in the next episode, and have a good time with it. It's fun to do.
So how do you navigate that?
Usually I try to just be straight with the player about how much they want me involved in that. When Colin and I talked through his class choice, he was very, very clear that he wanted to just leave exactly what it meant for him to be an ancestral guardian to me, because he wanted to enjoy discovering that. And Eric has been kind of the same way with the patrony side of his mark, and with he picked the Pact of the Tome for his warlock patron, or not for his warlock boon. And so, it would have been fine with me if Eric had said, and I want this to be the book. I want him to find a book specifically about this. And Eric and I had a conversation, and he had a couple of things where he kind of put it in a category, in kind of the same way that I had with Casey making it Fae. But he wanted to leave it to me to pick that out so that it could be a bit of discovery. I would say it's a little easier because because Casey and I have played together for so long. I have a pretty good sense of you as a player, in addition to you as a person, as we've been friends for a long time. And so I feel like I have a pretty good grasp of where a line would be, like of when I'm taking over something that you have and making it not fun for you. So that's why I asked. Part of it. Yeah.
I imagine it is tricky, and I, until this moment, hadn't even thought about it. And you've done it several times for several of my characters, with my familiar, with my cleric, with the dog companion that I have in the One Ring. And so you've done it very well. It just didn't even occur to me how difficult that must be, playing someone that is both yours and the characters.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, it's about anything I do. In my view is anything I'm doing, especially with an animal companion or a familiar or something like that, because those are choices you've made that are just expressions of your character. With like a warlock patron, or a cleric's god, it's a little bit different, I think, because the warlock patron is a choice the player made, but it's still outside of them. So it's outside of that character, and it's not something that character controls. It's something that character draws on. Same thing with the cleric and their deity. Whereas, a familiar is there to be useful to the spellcaster, and an animal companion is there, mechanically speaking, to be a help to the player. And so if I'm role-playing it in a way that's uniquely unhelpful, then I feel like I'm doing it wrong, because now I'm taking away some of the utility of your character if I'm playing in a way that it's, it's reclusive and it refuses to fight when you need its help or something like that. Like that's, I will say an exception to that is one of my wife's first characters. She based it on the character Sabriel from the Garth Nix novel of the same name. And Sabriel has a familiar that's a cat, that is an unwilling familiar. It's actually a living force of magic that's trapped in a cat body because of the magical collar that it wears. And so actually deep in its heart, much like all cats, it wants to kill its owner. And it's simply being held in check by the way in which it's trapped in the body. And it's bound to this bloodline, and so it has to help, even though it's not particularly willing to. And there are, it's a wonderful relationship, and it's a hilarious character. And Kelly wanted a familiar that was less murderous than that, but a familiar that thought itself too good to be a familiar. And so she had an owl that she thought it was far above all of this. And so I made her roll anytime she wanted help from the owl.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But that was her idea. Like, she asked me to do that. I would never do that of my own agency, but that was something Kelly wanted as part of the character. So in that situation, yeah, go nuts, crack on. But with this, it's more, I'm letting myself define the personality, and I'm very carefully defining a personality that I think Casey likes. Because again, it's Casey's character. It's part of Casey's character. And so it should be enjoyable for her to interact with it. So I would play the character differently if it was someone else's animal companion, because I would want them to have fun talking to it when they wanted to.
I kid you not, because we had decided that previously, the animal companion that I wanted. And the first time you spoke as it was exactly how I envisioned that you would have spoken as it. Like, that's... that was its voice.
That's so nice. Well, I'm very glad. That makes me feel good. I'm glad. All right. Next question. So, fair warning. This next question deals with Magic the Gathering mana colors, with which neither of my guests tonight were particularly familiar. So I pulled off the wiki a quick primer of what each color means so that they could answer this question from Darren, who asked it last week to RA, who's much more knowledgeable about Magic the Gathering than I am, frankly, and so was able to answer it very, very straightforwardly. Anyway, Darren asks, what would your character's color be if they were a Magic the Gathering card? So, either one.
Without knowing, even before you had shared that, my direction was green. I mean, that's...
Yeah.
Shade's mark is green. Her connection to nature is a large part of her identity. And so just seeing the descriptors that fit within that type of magic, I think would fit her well.
Yeah, that was my guess was green, because the keywords from the wiki were nature, wildlife, connected, spiritual, and tradition. And maybe not tradition with Shade, but all the rest of them, just because Shade's backstory doesn't allow a lot of room for traditions. But yeah. How about you, Colin? What color is Pog's Magic the Gathering card?
Pog would be red. I think from the description sent to us, it's pretty much descriptors that I had written on the initial outline of who I wanted to play. Those words are very it's freedom, emotion, active, impulsive, destructive, and like that's basically what I lined out to Philip. Like, I want to get into something that I can discover as a character, and I want to be in the middle of the fighting. Like that's what I want. And so like it's all just who Pog is, I think. So yeah, red.
We're going to know we've made it when someone draws Magic the Gathering cards for the character.
That's the art that needs to hang back there on that big empty wall space is a Pog Magic the Gathering.
Although I really want to Pog.
Yeah, same. We basically made merch the easiest thing in the world with this character.
I want to Pog Slammer with Pog.
Yeah, he's got to be a slammer. It's got to be the slammer, dude. And not just one of those plastic ones.
Or a big metal slammer that says Fury's Edge on it.
Oh, yes, dude. Mm-hmm. Well, great. Now Pog is absolutely bound to this weapon.
All right, and I've saved what I think is the hardest question for last. Laura asks, off-topic, in real-life question. What are your favorite novels?
I feel like we should have had more than 10 minutes advance warning on this question.
In fairness to Laura, she posted it 3 hours ago. Actually, 4.
For those of you that don't know, I teach English. So I reference my favorite novels regularly. And even with my students, I don't have a hierarchy. I more have like a top 10. And just every now when I talk about a book, I like throw in like, oh yeah, it's definitely in my top 10. The amount of times that I say that have probably exceeded 10.
It's not a top 10.
Got about 35 in the top 10.
Right. But mine are, they are not unique and they are so predictable. But some of my favorite novels are Fahrenheit 451. I love it so much. And right along with that is The Giver. It's one of my favorite novels to read, one of my favorite to teach. And those, yeah. Ooh,
Sorry.
2 of my favorites.
There's a funny story about parent interaction that made me think of, which I can't tell here, so I shouldn't have referenced it, but that's why I laughed. Colin?
It's a tough one. It's a tough one because I've read more than you may think for someone who looks like I do, but I find myself attached to all forms of art for mostly the purpose of how I connected with them at the time that I read them. So there's great and powerful works of literature that I have read that are fabulous. But as we've discussed in this space before, I found myself incarcerated in this life. And Philip actually sent me a copy of Ready Player One, and I was shattered by it. It was just everything.
I don't want to take credit. That one was Eric. I sent you a box of books too, but that one was Eric.
That one, in that case, Eric, you shattered me, bro. I know we've talked all about it. That book, at the time, because it had just come out, it was a brand new novel, and it struck every single chord of the things that I love as a nerd and the things that I missed being away from the free world. So, sometimes art comes across you in just the right time, and so for me, Ready Player One is pretty much secured. It's not the best book I've ever read, but it's my favorite novel for sure.
Nice. For me, I likewise have an ever rotating top list. Setting aside Lord of the Rings, which everyone knows is perpetually there. Dune. And High Fidelity. High Fidelity for a lot of the same reasons that Ready Player One for Colin, although different context. High Fidelity significantly altered the way that I thought about relationships in a very good way. And along with my sister, deserves credit for my engagement in marriage to my wife. So that largely for the personal context. Although it's just a wonderful book. You should read it. It's hilarious. As is the Hulu series based on it, which they did back in the summer. It's really good. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so Dune, High Fidelity, Lord of the Rings. Probably those would be perpetually high up. Sharps by KJ Parker, also fantastic because it has absolutely the best sword fighting. It's the best sword fighting book that I've ever read.
I felt like great. I understood swordplay reading that
right?
novel. I felt like I understood, like the way a documentary makes you feel educated on a topic. Mm-hmm. I felt about competitive swordplay.
Yeah, there is just no one who describes combat quite like KJ Parker. It's so coherent without feeling wordy. Anyway, if you want to get better at describing, I will say this was asked on a knowledge check a long time ago. If you want to get better at describing combat in D&D and describing how your character moves and fights, Sharps by KJ Parker. It's just a primer on how to describe a fight. It's so good. Anyway, I could go on about that, but
I want to add.
I did it on a knowledge check episode, so go watch
Chronicles of Narnia for myself.
Oh yeah,
Narnia has to be thrown in there. I was raised on that, and so that's
so good.
My intro to fantasy, and that's where the love affair began.
I didn't read them until college. I had never been exposed to them until a friend had.
That's kind of awesome.
The collection of them, and he was like, "What do you mean you haven't read these? You have to." And he just like handed me his collection. He's a good friend.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I read The Lord of the Rings before Narnia. I read The Lord of the Rings way younger than I could understand it, but my dad had been reading me bits of Lord of the Rings. That's my earliest memory of my dad's voice, is him reading lines from Tom Bombadil. So Lord of the Rings, I think I read before Narnia, which is not, I think, the usual order.
It's not. Growing up, I had that illustrated from the BBC cartoon, The Hobbit book.
Oh, that's
cool. And my mom read that to me, and that was wonderful. But my dad, you and my dad would have gotten along so swimmingly, and we've discussed this before, because his romanticized love of Lord of the Rings was right there. And he let us read The Hobbit, but he didn't want me to read Lord of the Rings until I had done Chronicles of Narnia to know that I would understand it. Because it was so important to him that if you read this, you have the capacity to understand and love it like I do. And if Narnia doesn't do it for you, if you can't get down with Prince Caspian, then don't even start reading my books, because I'm not going to have a son that does not like Lord of the Rings.
It was like a condition of the first year of our marriage for RA. I had not read Lord of the Rings. And it was like...
What?
I came into the nerdum world very late in life.
Wow.
Yeah, I had never read it, and it was sort of, I mean, jokingly, but maybe not jokingly. I don't know. I did definitely finish it within that first year of marriage.
So let me ask you, having not read Chronicles of Narnia or Lord of the Rings growing up, obviously you must have heard about them, and they must have been like expressively told to you their importance. Did they hold up when you got to them?
I don't know what rock I grew up under, but I don't actually remember hearing much about the Lord of the Rings or Chronicles of Narnia either way. My family, my parents read a lot, but it's a lot of mass-produced fiction. And so I think my first exposure to Lord of the Rings that I recall, actually, I told Philip this recently. I went to go see the third Lord of the Rings without having seen the second one.
How did you manage?
And I was awful. The poor person that sat next to me was like, wait, how, wait, did they?
Oh my goodness.
I'm a social person. My friends were going to go see the movie after finals, so obviously I was going to go too.
That's what we did after finals in high school. We went and saw the. That was how we saw all 3 Lord of the Rings movies. We went right after finals.
Yeah, that's what it was. And I was like, man, I want to know more about this story. But obviously not enough to have then. But obviously not enough to have then read it because.
Among the many joys of fatherhood is getting to share the nerdy things I'm passionate about with my daughter. And so, we're watching through the Marvel universe, and she's learning to play D&D, and we're reading Lord of the Rings. We've been reading Lord of the Rings very, very gradually, because she kind of goes hot and then cold on it for a while, and then really wants to hear it, then doesn't for a while. And so we had just come off recently of a cold spell where she wasn't very interested in hearing it. And the last thing we had read before was the Battle of Helm's Deep. And so this giant long battle chapter that she was just not at all interested in. Like that a bunch of people fighting. It's, just not very. And so we hadn't read for quite a while. And so I asked her, okay, do you remember what happened before? Like where we were? And she's like, they were trying to find Frodo and Sam have left, and they were trying to find. And so she's sort of getting through stuff very early in the Two Towers, and said, "Yeah." And then they met the riders and the king, and then they had this big battle. And she's like, she's like, "Oh, is that where Aragorn saw Éowyn, and Éowyn likes Aragorn, but Aragorn was troubled." She used the word troubled. Aragorn was troubled by it.
Wow.
Because he's betrothed to someone else, an elf. I don't remember her name. And he's afraid he'll hurt her. I didn't explain that to her. That's expressed in 6 sentences in Lord of the Rings. And it's one little exchange. She remembered this really detail is Éowyn hands a cup to Aragorn and her hand lingers against his, and Rose remembered that. And she touched him, and he felt like he was troubled by it because he doesn't want to hurt her, but he knows that she likes him and he's betrothed to someone. And so all of this nuance of the dynastic marriage between Aragorn and Arwen and the emotional baggage of Éowyn, that stuck. Giant battle. But
that's precious.
These 3 people.
That's so good.
And she doesn't like the romance. She's not interested in the romance. She was like, ugh, when it was obvious that Éowyn liked Aragorn, but she cares about the feelings. And it was so, I was just, so the things that will stick.
That's awesome.
That is awesome.
Because I definitely didn't understand that my first read, what was happening. But that just cracked me up. Anyway, so there you go. Those are our favorite novels and some discussions of them.
Yeah. And a rabbit hole,
which apparently we could talk about for a long time.
At the end of.
Which apparently we could talk about we could just have book club here. Anyway, we hope you have enjoyed this. Thank you so much for the interesting questions. This was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for watching and liking and subscribing to our videos and all the comments that we got on a couple videos ago. We made it above 40. Yes. So on the next batch,
we did it.
Not on the one that comes out Monday because that was already recorded, but the next batch of episodes, I will add my airship goggles to the get up. And I need to find something. I need to find a different shirt that doesn't have the big flowy sleeves. The big flowy sleeves were bothering me all of the last session. So different shirt this time, but airship goggles will be in. And congratulations. Thank you so much. That really does help with the visibility of our videos. So please continue to comment. I don't know exactly what the next incentive of, because there's only so much that I can do from the sternum up as far as costumes. So I don't know what the next incentive is.
But for this video, they should tell us their favorite novel.
100%.
Yes, for this video,
100%.
Please, in the comments, tell us what your favorite novel is and why. We would love to hear your story of your favorite novel and what it makes you think of and why it's important to you. We would absolutely love to hear that. That would be fantastic. So please,
love to read that.
For real. For real.
That would be, please do. Anyway, you can find us on all the social media at The Geek Pantheon on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and Twitter. And Eric streams on Twitch under that name. And obviously you're here, so you know that you can find us on YouTube at that name.
Where are
Colin
we?
also streams. Do you have a schedule right now, Colin, or is it's still Mondays mostly?
It was Mondays. Now it's when I can, but it's fun.
That's right.
And
'Cause you has a job.
If you follow at twitch.tv/sorrybtr, where the O is a 0, hit that little bell and you'll get the notification that I've gone live, and then we can hang out there for sure.
Yeah. Colin is a delightfully interactive streamer, and I highly recommend watching his channel because he is very engaging and has great reaction eyebrows. You do. You have
Where
an
you at,
excellent
Peter
reaction
Gallagher?
eyebrows.
They serve a purpose, that's for sure. Eric caught me in an embarrassing reaction just today, funny enough, so it's true.
Well, anyway, so again, thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed this. We hope you will enjoy the aftermath of this craziness that comes out on Monday. And in the meantime, this has been Khyber Shards. I'm Philip.
I'm Colin.
And I'm Casey.
And thanks for rolling with us.